Okay, so today is March 27th, 2019. My name is Diane Perry, a longtime classmate and friend of today's veteran and his wife Diane. We are on the campus of Nichols College in Dudley, Massachusetts, interviewing Raymond Lionel Beaudry, a United States Air Force Vietnam-era war veteran from the dates of June 28, 1974 to August 15, 1978. Hello, Raymond.
Hello, Diane.
Welcome. So we're going to start very basic with this interview. Please tell me where and when you were born.
I was born in Southbridge, Massachusetts on April 17th, 1956.
Okay, and who were your parents and what did they do for a living?
My parents were Lionel and Carmel Beaudry. My mother worked at the American Optical Company in Southbridge her whole life. My dad did various things. He drove trucks. He owned his own oil business for a while in the 60s. Not that long, and then he just worked wherever he could, mostly truck driving.
Really?
And he would work part-time delivering oil. My uncle, his brother, had his own oil tanker truck, and he used to go with him. He used to drive to Providence with his big rig and get oil and come back, and he would help him out from time to time. But yeah, he did different things. He was a licensed oil burner technician, so he always did that on the side.
Mm-hmm. And was your father in the military at all?
Yes, he was in the Army Air Force at the time. Air Force wasn't an official branch in World War II yet. It wasn't until after the war that they split it off from the Army and made them their own. So by the time Korea came around, it was its own branch.
I see. That's interesting.
Because my father-in-law was in the Air Force, who's younger than my dad was, and he served in Korea.
I see.
So he was in the Air Force as a standalone branch, but
Okay.
my dad was in both, so to speak.
All right. Okay. And how about your siblings? Who are they? What are they? You know.
I have one sister, Jean, who's a bit older than I am. She was the oldest, and she's retired, lives in North Carolina with her husband. They have no children at all, but they're still going strong.
Okay. What did she do when she was working?
Primarily secretarial work. She's worked all over, but they lived down in California for years, and then they moved to Arizona. But all the while, she mostly worked in law firms as like legal secretary work.
All right. So, before you went in the service, what were you doing?
Well, I had just graduated from high school, actually. We graduated in May of 1974, and then right away in June, the end of June, I shipped out to go to basic training. So I only had like a month off from graduation until I reported for duty.
So you talked about the Air Force. That's the branch that you went into, correct?
Yes.
And did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted. I did have a selective service number, but I chose to enlist. I figured I had a better shot at learning something more appropriate skill-wise had I enlisted, and I could control more or less some of where I would go and learn, as opposed to being drafted. You know, I didn't know what path that would have sent me on, so I just chose to enlist, and college didn't interest me at the time, so it just seemed like the logical thing to do.
And so, again, why did you choose the Air Force instead of something else?
I just thought it was more of a technically advanced branch than the other ones. I felt I could learn better skills to earn a living at, and my dad had been in, so it was partly because of that.
So you shared some ideas with you.
Yeah.
So what happened when you departed for training camp during the early days of training and all of that, from the time you left the house?
Yeah, well, I remember the recruiter picked me up at my house, and then we picked up a couple other guys along the way, and we went out to Springfield. I forget the name of the place that we were taken, but it was a big processing center in Springfield.
Okay.
And that's where they checked you out physically and made sure you didn't have any issues, health issues that would prevent you from going in. And then from there we were rounded up, and I think we went to Bradley, and then International Airport in Hartford, and then we flew to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas.
So before you get to Lackland, did you know anybody that was with you when you were picked up and brought to Springfield?
No, it was all guys I hadn't met before.
How'd you
so
feel about all that?
It was different, you know, being a kid, you know, at 18, you're not really sure what's going to happen, you know. I mean, a lot of people told me a lot of things about basic training and the military, so until you actually experience it yourself, it's a pretty intimidating process, at least in the beginning, because you really don't know where you're going. You're being herded like cattle, so to speak, and you have no control over anything, and you know,
Yeah.
so it was all pretty strange experience, you know.
So you got to Lackland Air Force Base in Texas.
Right.
How was that when you got there, and do you recall your instructors?
Yes, I had, excuse me, I had two drill instructors. One was Sergeant Struby. I wouldn't know how to spell it, but and another one was Sergeant Pena. Both the same. They were your typical drill sergeants, you know, mean, rough. Not as bad as probably Marine Corps sergeants, but you know, their job was to intimidate you and get you used to the military way of life. But for the most part, they had their good moments where they weren't always nasty, but you know, but they were typical, you know.
So you had said when you got there and they were nasty or what? So
well, it's what you always see. Either it's in the movies or somewhere wherever they depict military basic training. You know, any movie you can.
yeah.
You know, they're always yelling at you. You're never doing anything right. You know, your bed's not made right, or your locker's not right. I mean, they just do all kinds of things to mess with your head. And at first, you take everything personally, you know, so you just figure, you know, they have it in for you, you know, like you're not going to make it, you know. But once you catch on to what's going on, you know, you realize that they just want to see how you handle stressful situations, you know, because if you're in a wartime environment, which we were at that time,
Yeah.
you know, they don't want people cracking under the pressure. So
Yeah.
that was their end game, was to get you mentally prepared to deal with military life. So once you understood that, you know, I mean, yeah, they're going to write you up for doing this wrong, and then you just shrug it off and
Right.
just say yes sir, no sir, and move on. You know.
Well, you were a kid right out of high school or whatever.
Right.
So
I mean, it would have been easier probably if I was older. I mean, some of the guys in my flight were older than me. You know, they had some college background, so it was probably easier for them in a way. But I don't know.
headwise. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty intimidating to anyone who's never experienced something like that. So they have a way of making everybody feel like dirt, you know, from the get-go, so it doesn't really matter.
So how did you adapt to military life, including any physical regimen, food, that kind of thing?
Well, I remember the physical regimen was tough. I mean, not as tough as other branches probably, but you know, it was just bad because being in San Antonio in July, it's so hot. It was like probably 110 and really humid. And we had to wear these long sleeve cotton fatigues. And we had to do all these exercises and run. And it was just so bad from that standpoint. The food was so-so. It wasn't great. I didn't care for it that much. I know I lost a lot of weight in the 6 weeks I was down there because I didn't eat much. You just drank a lot because you were always dying of thirst because it was so hot.
Right. So that was while you were in the 6 weeks of training camp,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then what happened after that?
Well, after that, I came home. I had a 10-day leave. That's when I got married, and I had orders to report to Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado, for technical training.
Right. So you got some technical training. So
Which was for, at the time, that's what they called inventory management specialist. That was the title of the field that I was learning.
mm-hmm. And so that was when you were in Denver, and you were in Denver for 6 weeks?
6 weeks with my wife, and we lived off base. Because if you were married and you weren't of any particular rank, you weren't allowed to use base housing. So you were forced to live off base. So we got a little studio apartment right near the base, and we had no vehicle. We walked everywhere. So it was humble beginnings, but fortunately it was only 6 weeks. I know some of the technical schools, some of the different fields of study were much longer. Some could go 3-4 months, you know.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate in that it was fairly short.
So after that 6 weeks, what happened next?
Flew home. Took some time, leave, and then I had my orders to go to Travis Air Force Base in California. So I bought my sister's old Toyota that she didn't want anymore, and we drove out west, my wife and I. Took us almost 7 days driving. So it was interesting. You know, we got to see the country, at least half of, I mean, the northern part of it anyway.
Okay.
So it was fun, you know.
Nice experience. So, all right, so then you got to California, and what did you do there? How did that all work out? What was your role when you got to California?
Well, I was in the base supply, I think, as they called it back then. It was basically a supply warehouse, and that's where all the parts were stored for all the aircraft that were. One of the things with Travis was considered a part of the Military Airlift Command, which at that time the Air Force was made up of different commands, which was the high level of organization. And so the Military Airlift Command, Travis was a Military Airlift Command base. So I was assigned to that unit, to the 60th Supply Squadron, it was called. And you just basically took orders from the flight line, and your job was to, I worked in a section called demand processing, which is just a fancy word for order takers. And basically, you know, I worked on the flight line, and the crew chiefs would radio in to us when they needed a part for an aircraft. And the aircraft that we had on that base were all transport planes. So we had C-141s, which was a smaller version, and then we had the big C-5As, which were really huge planes. You know, you could put 13 Greyhound buses in one C-5, so they were pretty massive airplanes. So it took a lot to keep them flying. So
I mean, this was Vietnam era.
Yeah, the war was still going on. I mean, it was winding down at that time. you know.
But in your role, how did your role fit into, you know, the Vietnam War? You were concerned whether you were going to go or not? Were you sure that you were never going to go?
No, you were never sure of anything in the military. You never know from day to day, you know. There's no end date on your orders when you're assigned to a base. I mean, you know, you could be there 6 months, you could be there years. I mean, it really depended. So I knew I could go at any time. I mean, at that point in the war, they weren't sending a whole lot of people over there. So I knew that, you know, the odds are that I wouldn't have go there. But I remember when I first got to Travis, everybody would tell me that, you know, well, if you go to Travis, you're going to go overseas, because that was like the stopping point. That they would never let you sit there very long, and they would either send you to Europe or Asia, you know, Korea, Philippines, could be anywhere, Japan. So I didn't know how long I would be at Travis at that time. But no, at that, you know, we weren't. So there was always a shot that you could go over, but I knew it was, unless something drastically changed politically, that probably wouldn't have happened, because we were trying to get out at that time.
Right. So the parts for the planes and all of that, I mean, sometimes it was hectic doing what you were doing with the Vietnam War going on. Can you explain a little bit of that?
Yeah, there was always exercises. I mean, transport planes played a vital role at the end of the war, because that's how all the supplies and the troops got sent back, you know, that were over there. So it was our job in supply to make sure that the aircraft kept flying. So we'd always have exercises where we would have to launch so many aircraft without a delay to pass inspections. And so, you know, if the crew chief radioed in for a part, and they would always put a priority on it. So priority 1 meant we had 15 minutes to get the part to him. It was, you know, they called it a high priority. Priority 2 would probably be like half an hour you'd have to get the part out to the aircraft. And then the priorities after that were slightly longer time frame to deliver them. But it took some work. You know, you had to research. If they didn't give you the exact part number, that, you know, if we didn't have it in stock, it was our job to find an identical part that may have a different number. So we had to rifle through. Again, it wasn't computers back then, so you had to rifle through all the technical manuals for all the planes and look up all the parts, and they always had comparable parts that you could switch in and out. So it was a hectic day, you know.
Okay. What kind of friendships did you have while you were away there in the service?
Yeah, I had a few friends. You know, I worked different shifts. You know, sometimes I'd work daytime, other times I'd work night shifts. For a while there, I was working 12-hour shifts at night, you know, like 6 at night to 6 in the morning. You know, you'd work 3 days on, and then you'd have 4 off. So I kind of worked all around the clock. It really depended. You know, it could change at any moment. No, I mean, I got along with everyone. It was a pretty big, fairly good-sized office. There was probably 15, 20 of us working in there, different jobs, you know. You know, a couple of them I was friendly with outside of work, you know, because the married guys usually, I mean, we didn't, you know, once the work day was done, you went home. It was like, the good part about the Air Force at the time was it was like a regular job. You know, once you get out of training, you know, it was just you did your job and you went home. You know, unless you were on alert for a readiness inspection, and then you had to report to the base, and then you weren't allowed to leave until it was over, which could take 2 to 3 days.
Oh.
So those were hectic times, but no, I had a couple of friends that we would socialize with outside of work, and they'd come to our apartment, or we'd go to theirs. And
Maybe the park or something that you used to go to?
yeah, well, my daughter was born a year. I had been there a year, and she was born, so yeah, we would take her to San Francisco, to Golden Gate Park. So, but we got to see all the sights in San Francisco, ride the cable cars, and so I was fortunate where Travis was. I could go anywhere and see a lot of interesting things.
Yeah.
So I saw Yosemite National Park 3 times.
Nice.
Been to Reno, Lake Tahoe. No, it was a good time. You know, it was a good part of the country to be in.
Yeah. So how did you stay in touch with family and friends? You were in California, so, but tell me about that.
Well, we talk on the phone occasionally, you know, and then, you know, no cell phones yet, so
Right. Long distance.
to do it the old-fashioned way, you know. But no, because of where we were, it was a popular destination for people to come out and visit, because everybody liked to go to California, so I'm sure it wouldn't have been as easy if we were out in the middle of Nebraska somewhere, or South Dakota or something, you know. So we were kind of lucky, you know, where I was, you know, was amenable to visits, so.
Parents would go visit you, that's good.
Yep.
That's good. I know you said something about, there was parade duty or that
Yes.
kind of thing, because it was toward the end of the Vietnam War. Can you elaborate on some of that?
Sure. Well, when you're in the Air Force, at least at that time, you always had other duties that you could be assigned. You know, it could have been parade duty, it could have been base cleanup, where you would spend a week just cleaning up the base, picking up trash, and you wouldn't do your job, you would just do that all week. But parade duty would come around every now and then. You'd have to get in your dress blues and report to the flight line for parade duty. And I just remember some of the parades that I had to do was when the POWs were brought back from Hanoi. So that was a special moment. I was fortunate to have been there when that happened. So it was moving to see the guys come off the plane who could barely walk, and you know, you really saw the effects of war, or what it can do to a human being. You know, it was an eye-opening experience from a young kid from a small town, seeing all that, you know. But it was a good experience. I was glad I had that opportunity to see him come back.
So were there only soldiers that were coming back on these planes?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were there any children or anything like that?
Well, yeah.
that you
Well,
saw?
that's at the end of the war, when North Vietnam took over Saigon. Our base was tagged with airlifting all the refugees out of Saigon when the city fell, and you had kids and women and just people all over the place, and our job was to airlift them out as best as we could. So I supported that effort, and you know, we worked a lot of hours, and you know, they shot one of our planes down at one time, because you know, you couldn't fit everybody on the plane. So some people, if they had weapons, they figured, well, if we're not getting on, no one else is leaving either, so they would just shoot at the plane. And so it was pretty ugly, but you know, we got a lot of them out, probably not all of them, but they all came back to Travis, and I remember they were all set up in the base gym, kids everywhere, no parents, nothing. And that's, you know, the casualties of war. I saw firsthand what war does to people. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, to this day I have no idea where these kids went. I'm sure they got adopted or put in homes for people, you know. But yeah, but I was proud to be part of that effort to get as many kids out of there as we could. No, it wasn't just kids, but mostly
Right.
you know, you had a lot of women who had no husbands, or, you know, they were just, everybody was running around the city. They didn't know where to go or what to do, and they're being overrun by communists, and just, it was not a good time.
The different aspects of the Vietnam War, for sure, from all different eyes.
Yes, definitely.
So, when your time came to the end of your service time, did you consider re-enlisting?
Well, I did. I mean, most guys, well, not every, I can't speak for every single person, but there were guys re-enlisting when I was there that had been in longer than me. And before Jimmy Carter was president, they got pretty nice re-enlistment bonuses, you know, many thousands of dollars, which to a kid not making much money, that was pretty neat to, you know, yeah, I'd love to get that, to re-enlist, you know. But unfortunately, Jimmy Carter became president in 78, or 76, I think, yeah, 76, and took away all the bonuses, all the re-up bonuses, and cut the defense budget drastically at that time. So they were offering nothing to re-enlist. So, no, I did think about it, but I figured they weren't going to get 4 more years out of me for nothing. So
at that point, did you return home?
yes, we thought about staying out in California and finding a job and all that, but I wanted my daughter to know her family, which there was none around us at that time, so I thought it was important for her to be able to grow up knowing her family around her, so we decided to move back east. So.
Back to Southbridge.
Yes.
And how were you received by family and community?
Yeah, we were received okay, you know. I mean, the only thing back then, there weren't really any programs for veterans coming back to help them get back into the civilian life. You know, I thought I had learned a trade that could be transferable, but didn't always work out that way. And there was no help to help you find employment. You were kind of on your own. So that's what I did. I worked odd jobs, initially part-time, just to get money in. And then I finally got into a computer field, which I had used some computers, if you want to call them computers. Back then, it was more like teletype machines. But I kind of used that to get myself into the computer business. And started at the bottom as a computer operator and worked my way up over the years to programming them. So, I mean, I was lucky, probably luckier than some, you know.
So would you say that adjustment time was, you know, it was a trying time?
Well, it was. I mean, we were so young, you know, and I just thought it was strange when I came back, you know, because a lot of our friends from high school were still living here at the time, and I just remember I found I didn't have as much in common with them as I used to. So it's funny how the military matures you at a much higher rate than just going away and going to college or something like that. I just felt out of place in some of the social gatherings with my friends from high school at that time, you know.
It's a vulnerable age group because a lot of people are doing different things.
Yeah, everybody had gone their own way, and they were still in college, some of them. They were still in party mode, and, you know, I was what you would call the responsible adult at that time with a newborn, you know. I just felt I didn't have anything in common with anyone, so it was just, that was the hardest part for me.
Because you adapted to the work a little at a time.
Right, because at the time I left the Air Force, I was a supervisor, so I was in charge of like 20 people. I mean, I was only like 21, 22.
Yeah, so you had management experience.
So, I mean, how many kids that young get to run a whole office, you know?
Good point.
I mean, it's one of the good things about the military. They don't care what your age is. They teach you, and then they expect you to do the job. They don't care how old you are or how young you are.
That's good. So did you remain in contact with any fellow veterans that you were in California with?
No, I probably should have. I mean, I remember we took information from each other, and because I remember one of my friends, we left Travis, or we left California the same day. I remember he was married, and I think he lived in Georgia, so he was going there. And then I had another friend who was from Indiana. So yeah, it was, no, we just never did.
Just never happened. You went on with your lives. Are you affiliated with any veteran organizations now?
No.
Have you ever, since you came back?
No, never did. My dad always was. He always was into all the veterans groups. He was in the Legion. He was in the Franco-American War Veterans. And it's just not something I've been asked to join a few times. I remember living in Vermont years ago, and I was approached many times about joining the Legion in Vermont, and I just never, probably because I had so much of it, and as a kid growing up, my dad was always doing something. There was always a convention here, a convention there, and it was just, I think I had my fill of veterans groups. That I mean, I know they perform a valuable service to veterans. I don't want to knock them down like
No,
that.
no, just wasn't for you.
I just
you
had had enough for that, and I just didn't want to follow in those footsteps. You
Yeah,
know?
personal choice. So what have you done since separating from the military, taking what your experience, and how did you go forward?
Well, I took my limited experience in, the Air Force to, like I said, to get into computers, which at the time when I was out in Travis, computer programming was becoming a new thing. And it was something I always had an interest in learning how to do that, so I just worked my way into it. And it took me a few years, but I eventually got into it, and I did that pretty much my whole life, with the rare exception of about 10, 12 years ago when I got laid off with the economy went south there for a while in 2008. I ended up selling insurance and selling cars, but programming has been my life pretty much.
That's good. So you followed that pretty much most of the
Yeah,
time.
I didn't really stray from that too much. Always provided a good living for us,
Yeah.
all those years,
So how do you feel your service time experiences affected your life overall?
Well, I think it definitely affected me. I mean, I think it was a good experience, A lot of guys, I mean, it's easy to look back and say, oh, I know a lot of guys say, oh, those were the best years of my life, But, I mean, I don't want to dramatize it like that, but you do learn a lot of things, and you build a lot of confidence when you're in the military, because you're given so much responsibility at a young age, and you can't help but learn from that, which you don't get normally when you go to college, So I felt I had a good experience, and I'm still a proponent today of some kind of mandatory service for kids coming out of high school. I think it wouldn't hurt them to do a couple of years of military service,
Be a good training program from everyone?
Yeah, well,
I understand.
it gives you maturity, which you don't get sitting in a college classroom.
Right. You mentioned how when you first started, they were rough on you and they intimidated you, but they also gave you responsibility to build up your confidence. Is that true?
Yeah, well, once you get out of basic, then they just treat you as a responsible adult, and they expect you to do your job and do it well. And they have promotions, and unlike the private sector in the military, once you achieve a rank, you automatically get more responsibility. It just comes with the rank. So you don't have to go beg someone to promote me, promote me to this or promote me to that. If you've earned the rank, then you're it. So you automatically assume those responsibilities. So at the time I got out, I was a sergeant, so I was naturally going to be in charge of people. That just came with the rank.
That's good. So overall, the life lessons that you learned from being in the military, what would you say that it would be?
Always, do your best and be willing to work well with others, be part of a team. Military definitely is a teamwork type thing. That's the only way it works. So that helps you when you get into the private sector to get along with other people. And
teamwork is very important in all phases of life.
Not just military, but.
You're right. How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general as you live life today?
Well, I mean, I'm not a proponent of war. Having seen the effects of war on people and what it did to them, I mean, I'm not, I realize that there are times when war is necessary for your own protection. So I'm not totally against war for anything. It's just if our country's at risk, then definitely you have to do what's necessary. But we've had a few wars over the last 40 years that we probably could have done without, and it wouldn't have changed history at all. So I'm not really a proponent or against it. It's just it depends on the situation.
So if you had to leave a message for future generations of your experience in the military and military in general, who listen to your interview, what would you want them to realize or know? What message would you like them to get from you?
Well, I think it's important as an American citizen to try and give back to your country by serving it in some capacity. And it doesn't have to be in the military. It can be as a civil service employee or, just don't always take from the government. Give back to the government that's doing its best to protect you. And, I think the young people could do well to think more about what, doing more for their country as opposed to trying to always find what's wrong with it. Use it as a positive tool to correct what is wrong with it by serving it. So.
You feel it obviously gives you a different perspective of your country.
Definitely
as opposed
does,
to somebody
yes.
who has not.
Right.
Feel that you have more respect for your country than many if they're not in the service?
Well, I mean, there are people that have never been in the military that still love the country and will do anything for it. They just didn't choose that path. But what I don't like is when people are constantly criticizing the way government works. I mean, I criticize it myself from time to time, but if you're young and idealistic like I was, at that time, you can affect a lot of change by serving your country. You don't necessarily have to be a slave to your country.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you serve the country and work to make it better, if we had politicians that actually were interested more in serving than getting rich off of it, we'd all be better off, I think.
So you probably feel, if I'm reading that correctly, so some people in politics, it's probably a good perspective for them to have served,
Yeah,
to be
definitely.
able to.
Because I think the ones that have served would be the ones that wouldn't be so eager to plunge us into war.
Good point.
Whereas those who haven't, they have no stake in it. They don't, they don't know what it's like. It's easy to send other people to go fight a war when you don't have to,
Yeah, I can understand that. When you visited the Vietnam Memorial, can you tell me a little bit about that? You mentioned that when we were preparing.
Yeah, that was, I went a couple years ago with the Boy Scout troop from Dudley, and we went to Washington, D.C., and then we did visit the Vietnam Memorial, and it was moving for me. I mean, because when you're serving during a war like that, obviously you wonder if you're going to have to go over there and fight like everybody else, but then you also, I don't know what they call it, survivor's remorse or something like that, where you feel bad because other people may have died that went instead of you. So I'm looking at all these names on the wall, and I'm saying, I can't help but think, how many of these men went over there, they were picked ahead of me or instead of me and never made it back, So, you feel it was an emotional experience for me anyway. But I think it was my first time visiting the memorial since it was there. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, it was intense.
It has to be different for somebody who served during that time.
Yeah, because I was with people who didn't serve, so they couldn't understand. I mean,
right.
It's hard for someone who hasn't served or wasn't, not old enough to
when
remember.
You were visiting this memorial.
Right.
They weren't.
I mean, it's impressive in its own right, whether you were from that era or not, but it has different meanings to different people, obviously.
I can certainly understand that. Is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you would like to share or add?
No, not too much. I mean, I'm proud of my service that I did for my country. I would probably do it again. I don't know. It's hard to, you make the decisions you make at the time based on what's happening at the time. And when you're young, you don't always have the best wisdom behind you, so it's a lot of it is just knee-jerk reaction, and you just jump ahead and do something. But no, I don't have any regrets. I learned a lot, and I think it helped me get a job in a pretty good field later on, and so I can't complain too much.
Well, it seems to be that even though you weren't in the front lines of Vietnam, that your role, even though it was in California, helped support the war efforts in whatever capacity, because those planes had to operate with the proper parts.
Yeah,
and everybody's got a vital role in the outcome.
Yes, definitely, and it was an important role, only because if those planes can't fly, then it would have been a lot worse when the city fell. Who knows what would have happened if we couldn't get those planes over there to get those people out.
True. Well, Raymond, thank you for your service. It's been a pleasure
for allowing me
and interviewing with you.
You're welcome.